They say every job changes you. Maybe it's the people you meet or the things you see that no one else ever should. For me, it was both. I used to think being a private investigator made me invisible, a man behind the camera detached objective. I thought watching other people's secrets would keep me from facing my own. But I was wrong. A few years ago, I took a case that still keeps me awake at night. It wasn't about money or infidelity or even justice. It was about a woman who wanted something impossible. She wanted to be seen. And I thought I understood what that meant. Until I realized she'd been looking right back. Being a private investigator isn't like the movies. It doesn't make you cool or clever or even remotely heroic. Mostly, it makes you tired. You spend your nights parked outside motels and grocery stores pretending to read the same newspaper while waiting for someone to cheat, lie, or slip. You watch people through dirty glass and tell yourself you're helping someone, but really, you're just feeding their paranoia. Men hire me to follow their wives. Women hire me to confirm what they already know. Sometimes I get paid to find a missing dog, once a cat. That's about as wholesome as it gets. There was a time I had an office, a proper one, with a cheap nameplate and a flickering fluorescent light. Then rent-claimed cases slowed, and the landlord changed the locks while I was out on surveillance. Now I work out of my car. It smells like coffee, cigarettes, and old fast food wrappers. I tell myself I keep doing this because I like being my own boss. Truth is, nobody else will hire me. I'm not proud of it, but I once bent the rules a little too far. Insurance fraud, technically. It doesn't matter how small the number is. The word fraud stays tattooed on every background check. So I keep moving. I follow, I photograph, I wait. And I try not to think too hard about what any of it means. Then one afternoon, I got an email that didn't sound like any other request I'd ever had. Subject surveillance, personal. I would like to hire you to follow me. At first, I thought it was a joke or worse, a fetish. But the more I read, the more it felt deliberate. She wanted documentation of her day-to-day life, where she went, how she looked when she didn't know someone was watching. She wanted to be seen. I'd had my share of strange clients, but this was new. And I needed the money. We met in a park, not far from downtown, open enough that I could spot any weird behavior before it got dangerous. It was drizzling, that thin kind of rain that turns everything silver. She arrived exactly on time, sat on the same bench, and waited without checking her phone. The first thing that struck me was how ordinary she looked. Mid-30s, brown hair tied back, a crisp coat, the kind people buy when they finally start earning real money. If I'd passed her on the street, I wouldn't have noticed her twice. But up close, there was something calibrated about her. Her posture, her calmness, even the way she blinked, like every motion had been considered and accepted as appropriate. She introduced herself only as Claire. Her voice was smooth measured, with that tone people use when they've already decided they're in control. We spoke for nearly an hour. She explained she was a forensic accountant, the kind that tracks dirty money and broken paper trails. She dealt in hidden truths for a living. Now she wanted someone to turn that lens back on herself. "I want you to see me," she said, "to capture me when I'm unaware. No posing, no pretending, just observation." I asked her why, but she dodged the question, smiling faintly. Later, I'd learn that was her default response to anything personal, that gentle, unreadable smile. She grew up poor, she admitted eventually. Trailer parks, cleaning jobs, the sort of poverty that stains you even when you crawl out of it. She'd fought her way up, gone to college, built a life in glass towers and hotel lobbies that smelled like lemons and polish. But she still didn't feel real. Sometimes she said, I look in the mirror and don't recognize what's looking back. Maybe if I could see myself through someone else's eyes, I'd understand who I became. It sounded sad, almost poetic. Still, I made sure to lay out rules. No trespassing. No invasion of privacy beyond observation. No physical contact. She agreed immediately, almost too quickly. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a thick envelope of cash, and said, 1 week in advance. If I like your work, we continue. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her words. I want you to see me. Most people are terrified of being watched. She seemed desperate for it. I started the next morning. Claire left her apartment at 7:12 a.m., coffee in hand, hair pulled back in a low bun. I followed her to work, to lunch, to the gym she never actually entered. She just sat in the car outside, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for courage to arrive. For the first week, it felt like easy money. She was routine, predictable, even boring. But there was something hypnotic about the repetition, the way she held herself, the careful half smiles she offered strangers, the small ways she occupied space like she was auditioning for it. I'd take photos from a distance, then review them at night in my motel room. At first, they were just images, but gradually I started to notice patterns, the way she tilted her head when listening, how she bit her lip before speaking, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. I shouldn't say this, but I began to admire her, or maybe envy her. She seemed to live in control, deliberate, precise, everything I wasn't. When we met for our weekly briefings, she'd ask to see the photos. She'd study them like a scientist examining samples under glass. Sometimes she'd smile and say, good job. That's exactly how I want to be remembered. It was the first genuine praise I'd heard in years. It did things to me I didn't expect. Soon the job changed. She started leaving small gaps in her routine, as if testing me, going to new cafes, taking different routes home. Each time I kept up, she'd send a message later that night, impressive. It felt like a game won I didn't realize I was losing. After 2 months, she asked me to document more intimately, take photos of what I leave behind, she said. My desk, my coffee cup, my apartment door. I want to know how the world sees my absence. That should have been my cue to quit. Instead, I leaned in. One night, she left her handbag in the back seat of a taxi. I retrieved it before the driver could log it as lost property. When I got back to the motel, curiosity won. I laid the contents out on the bedphone. Charger, lipstick, notebook, receipts, a keycard from a hotel I didn't recognize. Under the lamp's yellow light, the arrangement looked deliberate, almost like a still life. I snapped a black and white Polaroid before packing it back up. When I showed her the photo the next day, she laughed softly. You see art in everything, she said. Then she slipped me a folded 100 and whispered, bonus. After that, boundaries blurred completely. I wasn't just her observer. I was her mirror. And somewhere along the line, admiration turned into something else. I'd find myself waiting outside her building long after she went to bed, staring up at the light in her window. Sometimes, I'd imagine she was looking back, that we were connected by the invisible thread between watcher and watched. 6 months passed like that. 6 months of notes, photos, recordings, and a growing sense that I was no longer documenting her life, but orbiting it. Every week, she'd look through my reports and smile as if discovering herself through my eyes. "You're good at this," she'd say. "You understand me." I wanted to believe that. I wanted it so badly that I didn't notice how completely she had me. The last time we met before everything changed, she handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was another advance and a single sentence written in blue ink. "Find out who I was before I became me." I didn't know then that those words would lead me to a place that still haunts my sleep. A trailer park 3 states away, a dead mother, and a smell that clings to me no matter how many times I shower. When you spend long enough following someone, you start to imagine you own a piece of their story. I knew where Claire bought her groceries, what time she left work, how she dyed her hair on stressful days. But she'd never mentioned her family, never even hinted that she came from anywhere other than the sleek apartment and the quiet parks where she walked after rain. So when she asked me to find out who she was before she became herself, I took it as another challenge. Maybe she wanted closure, or maybe she was just testing how deep I'd go. Either way, I wanted to impress her. I started with the basics: public records, old addresses, school alumni lists. The name Claire Henderson turned up nothing before age 22. No parents, no childhood, no digital footprint. It was like she'd appeared from thin air, already polished. I dug deeper and found a match under her mother's surname, Francine Hartwell. A small town, 3 states away. A news clipping, local woman, dies in mobile home, natural causes. That was it. No follow-up, no obituary photo. Just a paragraph that read, more like a notice than a story. Something about it bothered me. The daughter's name wasn't mentioned, but the timing lined up the year Claire left for college. I called the trailer park, listed in the report. An old woman answered, her voice sharp with suspicion. The moment I said, "Francine Hartwell," the line went dead. I tried again. Same reaction. One man muttered, "Don't dig that up," before hanging up. By the 5th call, I started to feel like I'd stumbled into a small town secret. Finally, an elderly resident agreed to speak so long as I didn't use his name. He rambled about politics, the weather, his failing eyesight, anything but what I'd asked, until finally I steered him back. "Francine," he said slowly, "didn't deserve what happened to her. Maybe she wasn't a saint, but no one deserves that." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" That he hesitated so long, I thought he'd hung up. Then they said natural causes. But the coroner, he wouldn't even touch the body. There wasn't much left to touch. "You ever seen a wasp's nest, Mr. One, that's been torn open? That's what she looked like. Holes all through her. Ain't no natural I ever heard of." He hung up after that. I just sat there in my motel room, phone in hand, replaying his words. A wasp's nest, holes all through her. I told myself he was senile. That small town gossip grows strange over years. But I couldn't let it go. I packed my camera recorder and gas tank and drove through the night toward that forgotten corner of nowhere. The trailer park wasn't hard to find. Even before I turned off the highway, I could smell it, a faint, rot sweet and earthy, like wet compost that had been sitting too long. The kind of smell that gets under your skin, that makes you breathe through your mouth. The park itself was half empty. Trailers leaned into each other like broken teeth. Paint peeled. Lawns were swallowed by brown weeds. I found the lot listed in the death notice. There was nothing there now, just a patch of dirt and gravel, darker than the ground around it. The space where her home had once stood was perfectly rectangular, as though the earth still remembered its shape. I crouched and touched the soil. It was damp despite the dry air. When I lifted my hand, there was a thin residue clinging to my fingertips, tacky like tree sap. A girl's voice startled me. "You shouldn't be here, mister." She was maybe 10, standing 20 feet away, arms folded tight. "Why's that?" I asked. "Smell makes people sick." She said it like it was obvious. Lady who lived here, her and her smell made everyone sick. Even the rats won't go near that spot. I wanted to laugh, but she wasn't joking. The wind shifted and brought the odor back stronger this time, almost alive, like something exhaling through the ground. "Where's your dad?" I asked. She pointed to a trailer 2 lots down. "He knows about it. He was here when they took her away." A few minutes later, I was standing on his porch. He opened the door just enough to glare at me. I introduced myself, said I was a private investigator looking into an old case. He didn't move, just lit a cigarette and squinted through the smoke. "I'd invite you in," he said, "but you've been near that lot. Don't want that stink inside my walls." He studied me a moment longer, then sighed. "You're not the first to come asking. Won't find much left." "What happened to her?" I asked. He drew on his cigarette, exhaled slow. "They said natural causes. Heart failure, heat stroke, depends who you ask. But I saw the men that carried her out. They were wearing hazmat suits, like she was radioactive. The trailer was dripping. They had to use a crane to lift it whole because it started falling apart when they touched it. Dripping with what he flicked ash over the railing. You don't want to know. Just think about something rotting from the inside out till the walls start sweating the same sickness." He went quiet after that. Then he reached into his back pocket and handed me a small warped photograph. "Took this the day they hauled it off," he said. I was a kid. Climbed on my buddy's shoulders just to see. The photo was faded, but I could make out the inside of a trailer through a cracked doorway, a couch floral wallpaper, and something slumped in the corner. At first, I thought it was a pile of clothes. Then I realized it had a hand. The skin looked soft, porous, like bread left too long in water, pocked with holes, dozens, hundreds, some small, as dimes, others large enough to glimpse darkness inside. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. He took another drag, eyes distant. "That's her, or what was left." Back at the motel, I couldn't stop staring at that photo. Something about it made my skin crawl in ways I didn't understand. I'd seen plenty of crime scene photos before, but this wasn't decomposition. It was transformation. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept flashing back to Claire's face. Her perfect posture, the way she smiled when I pleased her. Was she the same girl who'd found her mother like that? Was this what she wanted me to uncover? I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I kept digging. A cop friend of mine owed me a favor. He worked records in a neighboring county, the kind of guy who could find anything if you knew how to ask. When I sent him the photo, I expected confusion or disgust. Instead, he went quiet. "You didn't get this from me," he said finally, "but you might want to look at this." A day later, he emailed me a classified case file from another state. Different name, different city, but the same description. A man found dead in his bathtub body, partially dissolved, walls corroded, steel beams softened. The apartment condemned as a biohazard. The coroner's note chilled me. Flesh appears porous, hollowed, consistent with advanced tissue digestion of unknown origin. I scrolled through the attached photos until one stopped me cold. There in the background of a police shot was a blurred figure watching from the stairwell, a woman in a business coat. The file listed the tenant of that apartment complex, Clara Hensel. Different name, same face, Claire. I sat there for a long time, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. People change names all the time. Maybe she'd lived there before moving here, but the timing didn't match. That incident happened barely 2 years ago. And the thing that finally broke my denial was what my friend said next. We found another disappearance tied to that building. Young guy on the ground floor. Never recovered. You ever get the feeling something's following her? The phrase sent a chill up my spine. Something following her. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't that something was following her. It was the other way around. She was the pattern. Everywhere she went, something rotten bloomed in her wake. That night, I printed every photo I had of her. I laid them out on the motel bed, beside the picture of her mother's remains and the file from the apartment case. One by one, I studied their faces, the mother, the old man in the tub, Claire smiling at a coffee shop. And then I noticed it. A detail I'd missed before. In one of my photos, caught by the glare of a cafe window, her eyes reflected the street behind me, but not as a single image. They shimmered, split like a fly's compound eyes, catching too much light. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe just a trick of the lens. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I sat there till dawn, surrounded by photos of a woman who didn't belong in any of them. And somewhere between exhaustion and dread, I realized the truth. I hadn't been watching her. She'd been teaching me how to see her. By the time I traced that apartment complex, it had already been condemned. The report said, biohazard, unstable foundation, pending demolition. Yet there it was, squatting at the edge of an industrial district. Windows bordered the air around it, warped by heat, and something else. Something that shimmered faintly, like oil on water. I parked 2 blocks away. Even from that distance, I could smell it, the same damp sweet rot from the trailer park, only hotter, thicker. I'd brought gloves, a mask, a flashlight. Somehow, it still felt like walking into a mouth. The door hung off its hinges. When I pushed it open, the hallway sighed, literally exhaled. The air was moist, heavy humming, with a low vibration I could feel in my teeth. Walls that had once been white were now veined with reddish streaks, as if the building itself had veins. My boots stuck to the floor. Every step came away with a wet peel. The deeper I went, the more I realized the building wasn't abandoned. It was alive. Old umbrella frames jutted from corners where fabric had melted away. Cardboard boxes sagged into puddles of pulp. A chair collapsed under its own weight. It all felt eaten, digested. Then came the sound that froze me, a slow drip. 1, 2, 3. Each drop landed with a viscous plop like sap from a wounded tree. I followed the sound to a small storage room. The door was half open. Inside, curled against the wall, was a man, or what had been one. His skin was blistered and pink, threaded with red veins that pulsed faintly even in death. One eye was gone, replaced by a cluster of cratered holes. The air smelled of copper and yeast. His hands were fused to the doorframe as though he'd tried to claw his way out before the flesh melted around the wood. My flashlight trembled. I couldn't look long. The sight pressed against the inside of my skull like fingers. I backed away, bumping into the opposite wall, and felt it yield. Soft, warm. I shined the light and saw the wallpaper breathing. That's when I ran. Up the stairwell toward whatever faint light still bled through the second-floor window. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. The hallway at the top of the stairs looked worse. Everything was lacquered in a film of amber resin. It shimmered as if sweating. The apartment at the far end, apartment 204, still had police tape across the door frame. The tape was half submerged in the same resin, rippling gently as though the glue underneath were still wet. I pushed inside. The room was a fossil of chaos. Half-melted magazines hardened into ridges, furniture fused to the floor. The walls swollen into bulges like wasp hives. From the center of the ceiling hung what looked like paper-thin layers, folding over each other in perfect geometric waves. The smell hit next hot sugar blood and rot. It made my eyes water behind the mask. But what held me there wasn't the smell. It was the motion. The hive moved, slowly, rhythmically, as if breathing. I should have left. Instead, I stepped closer, hypnotized. Tiny amber droplets oozed from the surface, catching the beam of my flashlight like tears. Without thinking, I reached out and touched one. It was warm, soft, almost velvet. For half a second, it felt good, a pulse of warmth that traveled up my arm and settled behind my eyes. Then something inside twitched. A hand burst out of the hive and clamped around my wrist. The strength was impossible. Bones cracked. I screamed, or thought I did. The thing shoved me backward, tearing itself free from the hive with a wet rip. A man or the shape of one emerged, skinless, eyes black and glossy, mouth lipless teeth clicking like insect mandibles. He looked half dissolved, half reborn. "You smell raw," he rasped. The words were human, but wrong, stretched thin like tape. He dragged himself forward, legs trailing, ribs flexing like gills. I stumbled against the wall, slipping in resin. He stopped inches from my face. Then suddenly, something changed in his expression. Fear. He recoiled with a hiss, backing into shadow. No. No. I didn't know," he muttered, voice cracking. "You're hers. You should have said. What I managed. I thought you were another one. I didn't know she sent you." He pointed a trembling hand at me. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I didn't mean to look." "Who are you talking about?" He laughed, a bubbling wet sound. "You know. You love her too." His head tilted at an impossible angle. "She likes to be seen." I looked without asking. She gave me the nest, said I could stay if I built it, said I could eat anything I caught. He reached toward the closet where the air shimmered darker. "She's jealous of us, you know, of anyone who can love her." His eyes gleamed with worship and terror. "What color are her eyes?" he whispered. I shook my head. "Blue." He laughed again, shivering. "No. Compound." Then he vanished into the hive, like a puppet yanked by unseen strings, leaving nothing but a trail of glistening resin. I bolted for the door. I don't remember getting outside. One minute I was in that living nightmare, the next I was behind the wheel, screaming down the road, with blood running from my wrist and tears blurring the headlights. The next clear memory I have is waking in a hospital bed, tubes in my arms, my skin wrapped in gauze. They told me I'd been found at an intersection engine, running delirious from infection. 6 months of fever followed, 6 months of nightmares in which the walls pulsed and voices whispered through the vents. The doctors said sepsis. I said nothing. How could I explain that I'd seen a man crawl out of a hive and speak her name? Sometimes I'd wake in the dark, convinced I could feel her watching from the corner of the room. Sometimes I'd smell that same hot, sweet rot and see patterns forming on the ceiling tiles, hexagons spreading slowly. Claire visited once, just once. She brought flowers, real ones. They wilted within hours. She sat beside me, perfectly composed, and studied the bandages on my hand. "I liked your initiative," she said softly, but the results were disappointing. My throat was raw. It took effort to speak. What happened in that building? She smiled the same smile that never reached her eyes. "You looked too closely." Then she leaned forward, close enough that I could see tiny facets glinting in her irises. "You see it now, don't you? How small we all are under the lens." Before I could answer, she stood, smoothed her coat, and left. The nurse said she never signed in. No record of her visit exists. They discharged me with half my strength and a list of medications as long as my arm. The doctors said I'd make a partial recovery. They didn't say what to do about the dreams. Weeks later, she called. Her voice was calm, affectionate, as if nothing had happened. She wanted a recommendation. For another artist, she said. "Someone who can capture me as you did. I want to see myself again." I laughed, or tried to. "You don't need another picture, Claire. You need help." "Help," she echoed, amused. "You don't understand. I am the help." She asked about my nephew, an art student I'd once mentioned in passing. I told her I didn't remember, but I did, and I hated myself for it. "Give me his number," she said gently. "He'll be perfect. I want a portrait this time. I want to know what I look like through new eyes." I felt the pen slide between my fingers before I even realized I was holding it. My hand shook as I wrote the digits down. She smiled a slow, satisfied smile that felt like being dissected. "You did a good job," she murmured. "Better than anyone before you." She tucked the paper into her coat pocket. "One day you'll come back. They always do." I wanted to argue, to tell her I'd burn every photo, every file, every memory. But my voice wouldn't work. All I could do was watch as she walked to the door light, catching her hair glinting in a dozen directions at once like wings. Before leaving, she turned. Her eyes caught the light again, fracturing it to countless mirrored points. "Tell your nephew," she said, "that when he paints me, he should never look directly at my eyes. Not for too long." Then she was gone. For a while, I convinced myself it was over. The fevers faded. The bandages came off. But sometimes, late at night, I catch a reflection in the dark window of my apartment, dozens of tiny lights staring back. And beneath the faint hum of the city, I can hear something else. A soft rustle, like wings brushing glass. 3 days ago, my nephew called. He sounded excited. Said a woman had commissioned him for a portrait. He wanted my opinion on the reference photo she sent. He texted it while we spoke. When I opened the file, my phone froze, screen bleeding light pixels, fracturing into hexagons. For a heartbeat, I saw her face staring out at me, smiling eyes glimmering like 1,000 mirrors. Then the image vanished. "He's still painting," he said. "He says the longer he looks, the more beautiful she becomes." And in the background of our call, I swear I heard the faint buzz of wings. I don't know if what I saw was real anymore. The doctors said infection. The police said contamination. But late at night, when the world is quiet and my walls start to hum, I can still hear her. Sometimes, I dream of her face bright and fractured eyes glittering like glass shards. Sometimes, I wake up to find the same residue on my skin, warm, sticky, and faintly sweet. I deleted the photos. burn the reports. But no matter what I do, I can still feel her gaze. She doesn't just want to be remembered. She wants to exist in you, in your eyes, your dreams, your reflection. So if you ever feel like you're being watched when no one's there, if you catch your reflection moving a fraction too late, don't look too closely, because maybe, just maybe, she likes to be seen.